And I think he recognized that there was a time, you know, even as a youngster, when I'm just going to have to learn how to fight back, and you have to face the music. So they took us to boxing lessons early, and I think it was a very good thing, I must say, because it did teach us an enormous amount about discipline, but more importantly, it taught me how to count on myself, that there was nobody there. I didn't have a big brother. I didn't have any mates that I could say, you know, give us a hand here. It came down to one day when I could feel my heart pounding, and I had to face that corner where they were always going to be there. And it was, are you going to do this now, or are you going to run away? And that made a huge difference, because when you're young, you're so impressionable. Yeah. To have the, you know, courage of them saying you can do this, and go up there and actually do it, accomplish it, and get past it, that sets a standard in your own life, that you had to count on yourself, and you can continue to do that no matter how tough they look. They're never as bad as they look. They're never really as bad. It all comes down to what you've got inside, I think.
Yes, I saw you saying the other day as a motto for life, keep your gloves up and defend yourself at all times. So that philosophy has stuck with you from those. Well,
I think it's unfortunately born out of necessity. Yes, it definitely has, and I would say no matter what business you're in, whether you're in the stock market or whether you're in any type of high business, or if you're just in everyday dealings with people, you always need to be careful, quite naturally.
Were you ever tempted to be, because you won a Golden Gloves award, were you ever tempted to be a professional boxer rather than a professional dancer?
Oh yeah, there was times when I thought to myself, this is something that I could do. I moved pretty quickly, and I had a really good hard right hand, and I thought I could persevere and do very well. But it's a tough sport. It's a tough sport. I take my hat off to those fellas. This little Wayne McCullough, I was at one of his fights one night, and he's just made out of iron, that little guy. And Stevie Collins is another fella that I've seen fight, and it's a tough, tough game.
Tough game, and however much you may thump your body and hammer your body, you're not hammering your brain with punches and things like that. You know, that's what makes it worse, isn't it?
Absolutely. You know, again, there's something in their hearts that gives them the drive and courage and determination that they need night after night to face in there and challenge themselves. And they are challenging the other man, but they're really challenging themselves. At the end of the day, they have to go inside their own head before the first punch is thrown. And with any great fight, you'll always notice after the first round, somebody got hit harder than the other guy, and he goes back to his corner. Nobody knows but the two fighters, but the two fighters know who's already won. It might go a few more rounds, but they already know who won.
That's right. And meanwhile, the commentators say after someone gets thumped 8 times, they say, and that one really hurt. You know, I mean, they all must have hurt. They all must have been agony.
Absolutely.
Anyway, you made a shrewd decision, Michael, there, I think, in terms of in favour of dance. And everybody says that how you went to your first dance school at the age of 11. Was dance already in your blood by that point? Were you aware of it, or was it something new at the age of 11?
No, it was something brand new. I mean, when I was a little toddler, about 4 years old, my grandmother was trying to teach me steps in the kitchen. It lasted all of about 5 seconds because I ran away and had no interest, and she was more than slightly disappointed, I must say. But at the age of 11, then my parents had the first opportunity to take the time and bring us to dance class. I must say that we didn't know. My brother and I were down playing baseball, and when they came down for us and said we were going to go and try this, so it was a new experience completely. And the first teacher that we went to told me that I was too old to learn. At 11 years old, most dancers start when they're 5, even younger than that in these days, with any kind of dance. So he said I was too old, and first I thought I had a small feeling of relief. Well, that's fine with me. But then, the more I thought about it, the more it aggravated me. You know, again, he was telling me there was something that I couldn't do, and so that was yet another little challenge along the road. Another thing, you get a little higher in the mountain, you can see the next one is always waiting for you. So I'm glad we persevered and we went on.
Yeah. And then you went on to the point where at 17 you won the All-World Irish Dancing World Championship, which was obviously a major thrill. Were you by that point intent on being a full-time dancer, and had you any idea how to go about it, or not at that point?
No, quite honestly, it was so different in competition. Again, very disciplined. The rules, the regulations were set. To me, the top of the world those days was to win the world title and be the first, American to be able to do that. So it was an enormous thing, and it goes back again. I know I've said it a few times already, but it does. It goes back to counting on yourself, and no one is going to go in that basement or garage or wherever it is and practice except you. Nobody's going to make you do that. Nobody's going to watch over you. No one cares that much. No one gets out of bed every morning and says, "What can I do for Michael Flatley today?" I'm the only one who's going to do that, yeah. And that's the way that I had to count on myself there. But no, that seemed like the top of the world. It wasn't until much later in life, in my early 20s, when I got an opportunity to tour the world with the Chieftains, who are such a fabulous group of guys and brilliant musicians. And I got to Carnegie Hall with them and got to do a solo. And I realized that night, this is it.
This is for me.
This is for me, absolutely.
That was the moment.
That was it. That was the time. I did about 5 dances that night, and I remember the audience getting up, and I remember doing a triple spin that night and using my arms, and I remember I could feel the audience reaction. Even if you couldn't see them, I could feel them, and I just knew this is what I was born to do. I have got to find a way to dress this properly and to take it to the world stage. There has to be a way to do this, because I wouldn't be happy now doing anything else.
That's a great moment. That was about what year then that was?
Oh God, I don't know. I would have been about 21 or 2, I guess, at the time. So that's going back quite a ways now.
About 1980 or something.
Yeah, early 80s.
About early 80s, and then the next 10 or 14 years of your life were devoted to discovering the way to achieve that.
Exactly.
And I mean, I remember there was a line in a film I produced called The Slipper and the Rose, a story of Cinderella, and at one point Cinderella says to the fairy godmother, played by Annette Crosby, how do you do all this magic? And Annette Crosby, who acted superbly in it, said, well, that's a trade secret, my dear, but it helps if you dream. Mm-hmm. And looking through the story of your life, that's part of your philosophy, isn't it? You were caught daydreaming at school.
I was. You
were dreaming that night in New York with the Chieftain.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm the type of person who's like that, and I don't suppose I'll ever change. It's funny when I look back how much of a little boy I am still in my heart, and I can see it in other people, although they won't admit it. A lot of people that I meet, especially if I have a couple of beers with them, that little boy or little girl is still in there, and they won't admit to it maybe, but it is there. And I see to that. And when I play to audiences, that's really what we're playing to, is the little person that's down deep in them that's still there. When I was a child, I used to get in so much trouble at school for dreaming, because I'd be staring out the windows and they'd say, "Flatley, what the hell are you looking at out there?" I could never answer because, I didn't want to tell them what I was thinking about at the time, obviously. But it is the same. That night in New York, I remember afterwards everybody going for a couple of drinks and having a chat, and for long periods I would be just sitting there delighted about how it went that night, dreaming about what could be next, what was the next. I often would go for long runs in the woods in Palos Park on the southwest side of Chicago for miles just on my own, and it would seem that I could be 2 hours and it would seem that it's 5 minutes, because the whole time was taken up creating and thinking, what in the world could I do next and how could I take it to that next level.
And that all pays off later, and I suppose all the jobs that you've done too paid off in their way. They were an education too on your road to that particular.
No question about it. I'm not too proud to dig ditches. If anything went wrong tomorrow, I would be more than happy to do that again, because I came up the hard way. I've done numerous different jobs out of necessity over the years, but I'm glad I've done them, because it taught me the hard way. It also taught me then, when I have a few bucks, I'm not going to be running around throwing big, huge parties and just spending it here and spending it there for no reason. I look after my family. I will always, try and be level-headed about those things, because it didn't come easy to me, believe me. I have a feeling that a lot of people that are in this business, particularly the arts, are very vulnerable, because we're asked to deliver the most extraordinary things. We're asked to open up our hearts and put them out for people on display. They might like it, they might not. They might tear you to pieces in the papers, or they might say how great you are. But you're there, you're vulnerable, you're out on a limb, and you're asked to do it night after night. And probably none as difficult as dance.
that's a perfect cue for the second piece from Lord of the Dance. Great number there, Michael, and no music at all.
No music. No, that one is was created a cappella, and a lot of the dance, believe it or not, was created in the dark, so that we could so we had to focus completely and entirely on the sound and the rhythm patterns, so nobody would be forced to look in the mirror and be concentrating on the style, be more in tune with the actual heartbeat and heart rhythms that we were putting into the steps. But I've always wanted to do a dance with just the footwork, because there's music in that, and there's music in the rhythm patterns and the drums and the highs and the lows, and I dare say I've had a difficult time with previous composers from time to time.
Yeah.
So this gave me a little bit of freedom when I needed it most.
Keep future composers on their toes, as it were. Now, we were in the 80s just now, and we were talking about, you had a tough time in the early 90s in LA. That was, you were short of cash. And
absolutely, yeah, a very difficult time. There was times in Los Angeles where I would have to walk miles and miles just to teach a couple of hours of dance classes to be able to, pay for dinner. And there were times I couldn't afford a cup of coffee. But they're not bad times. Looking back on them now, again, it's all part of the overall experience, and it helped me to realize how important it was for me to try so hard and to try and do something completely new. It gave me great exposure, a great broad vision of a number of different nationalities, and I think made me go inside myself even more to pull out whatever it was that was in there.
At the same time, Los Angeles is not an easy place to be struggling. It's tougher than some in that sense.
It's a tough old place, I must say. Some people think it's wonderful, and granted, places like maybe Beverly Hills or places like Malibu are great if you have a lot of money. If you don't, it's a very tough city. It's a very tough city.
And then, of course, 1994 was the moment of eruption, the acme of all you'd been hoping for or working for with Riverdance on 7 Minutes on Eurovision and then on stage. And that was a huge explosion. That was obviously a thrilling time.
Yes.
I mean, the reaction on the Eurovision was greater than you anticipated.
Absolutely, no question about it. I mean, to me, it was the culmination of all of these thoughts and ideas that I'd been putting together for 15 years. You know, it was finally my opportunity to put together a piece of work, a piece of art that would last forever, that people would stand up and say that is something really special. So I was, on one hand, I knew because of the audience reaction all these years in the States when I was dancing that we were going to be well received, particularly if I could get all these other dancers with me. On the other hand, I didn't realize it was going to be quite so strong and quite so immediate, and God was good to us that night.
And then Riverdance, when you expanded it, went on stage, went Dublin, London, Dublin, and then your real make or break moment, wasn't it? When you had your dispute with the producers over copyright and artistic control and all those things, and neither side would give in, and your lawyer called you the night before the opening night and said it's time to put the chairs back on the table.
That's exactly right.
what does that mean, you said? And he basically said, you're out.
That's right.
Now that was make or break time, wasn't it, really? You could have been shattered at that moment.
Well, I think quite naturally anybody, if you dig deep for a long time, you put your blood, sweat and tears into something, you're bearing your heart. It's like giving up a child. This is your child, except you don't have a choice. They just take it. And that's, I think, terribly unfair. And for any artist in the world, it's a terrible thing to do to somebody. And you have to make a choice then again in your life. And it's funny, your mind works a bit like a computer in that it can send so many signals so fast up to your brain and go through so many experiences and see flashes of pictures, and all the things that come back to you, funnily enough, in those minutes are the tough things. Well, don't forget you did this, you know, and I'd be, you know, sitting there thinking,